Every night, Jake made the same promise to himself. Tomorrow, I'll start. Tomorrow he'd go to the gym. Tomorrow he'd finally work on his business. Tomorrow he'd stop wasting hours on his phone. And every night, he genuinely believed it. The strange part was that Jake wasn't lazy. He actually wanted to change. He had watched motivational videos, made plans, downloaded productivity apps, and even bought things he thought would help him become more disciplined. But somehow, when tomorrow became today, he always found a reason to wait. Monday would be better. Next week would be better. Maybe after work became less stressful. Maybe after he got more sleep. And then one morning, Jake realized something uncomfortable. He had been saying, tomorrow, for almost 2 years. That's when he asked himself a question most people never stop to ask. Why does tomorrow always feel easier than today? And the answer has almost nothing to do with laziness. Jake decided that this time he would actually figure out what was happening inside his mind. So he started paying attention to the exact moment when he wanted to begin something important. And he noticed something strange. The moment he imagined starting, he didn't imagine the difficult part. He imagined the finished version. He saw himself becoming fit, successful, productive, and confident. But he didn't imagine the uncomfortable workout, the boring study session, the failed first attempt, or the hours of work required to get there. Tomorrow felt perfect because tomorrow contained the reward without the discomfort. Today was different. Today required action. And this is one of the first reasons your brain loves the idea of tomorrow. Tomorrow lets you experience the emotional reward of believing you'll change without forcing you to experience the discomfort of actually changing. But then Jake discovered something even more interesting. One evening, he had an important task waiting for him. He knew he should start, but instead he opened his phone. He watched one video, then another, then another. For a few minutes, he felt completely relaxed. The pressure disappeared. He wasn't thinking about the task anymore. And that's when his brain learned something important. Avoiding the task made the uncomfortable feeling disappear. This is where procrastination becomes more powerful than simple laziness. Your brain is constantly looking for ways to reduce discomfort right now. When you postpone something, you get an immediate emotional reward, relief. The task hasn't disappeared, but the uncomfortable feeling has. And your brain remembers that. So the next time you feel the same pressure, it suggests the same solution. Avoid it. Delay it. Tell yourself you'll do it tomorrow. Jake began noticing another pattern. Every time he postponed something, he created a better version of himself in his imagination. Tomorrow's Jake would wake up early. Tomorrow's Jake would exercise. Tomorrow's Jake wouldn't touch his phone in the morning. Tomorrow's Jake would work for 3 focused hours without getting distracted. Tomorrow's Jake would finally become disciplined. But when morning came, nothing magical happened. He was still the same person with the same habits, the same phone, the same distractions, and the same resistance. This is one of the biggest traps behind procrastination. We imagine our future self as someone completely different from who we are today. So today's version of us feels comfortable giving tomorrow's version all the responsibility. But tomorrow doesn't create a new person. It simply gives the same person another opportunity to make the same decision. At this point, Jake thought the solution must be motivation. Maybe he simply wasn't motivated enough. So he started watching more motivational videos. He imagined how amazing his life would be if he finally changed. For a few hours, he felt inspired. But the next day, that feeling was gone. And he realized something important. Motivation feels powerful, but it isn't reliable. If you only work when you feel motivated, your progress will depend on your emotions. Some days you'll feel unstoppable. Other days you'll feel tired, bored, or distracted. And those are exactly the days when the habit matters most. Jake finally understood that waiting to feel ready was another form of procrastination. Sometimes motivation doesn't come before action. Sometimes it comes because of action. But there was still one mystery Jake couldn't understand. Why did some tasks feel almost impossible to start even when he genuinely wanted the result? Then he looked at the goals he had been postponing. They were enormous. Get in shape, build a successful business, learn a new skill, completely change my life. He wasn't looking at the first step. He was looking at the entire mountain. And when your brain sees a huge task with an unclear starting point, it can create a feeling of overwhelm. Suddenly, everything else seems easier. Checking your phone feels easier. Cleaning your room feels easier. Watching another video feels easier. Even doing nothing feels easier. Then you tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow when I have more time. But tomorrow doesn't make the mountain smaller. It only moves the starting line. And then something happened that finally made Jake understand how serious the cycle had become. One night, he looked at a list of things he had promised himself he would do. Almost every item had the same invisible word next to it, tomorrow. He had delayed the gym, delayed the business, delayed learning, delayed fixing his sleep schedule, delayed the project he had been talking about for months. And suddenly, the problem wasn't just that he hadn't completed those things. The problem was that he had started losing trust in himself. Every time he promised tomorrow and didn't follow through, a small part of his confidence disappeared. He began thinking, maybe I'm just lazy. Maybe I don't have discipline. Maybe I'm not capable of changing. And that thought created even more pressure, which made starting even harder. The cycle was no longer just procrastination. It was becoming part of his identity. That's when Jake tried something completely different. Instead of promising himself that he would work for 3 hours, he promised himself only 5 minutes. Instead of saying he would completely change his diet, he decided to make one better choice. Instead of saying he would build his entire business, he opened his laptop and worked on one small part of it. At first, it felt almost too easy, but that was the point. He wasn't trying to finish the mountain. He was trying to prove to his brain that starting wasn't dangerous. And something unexpected happened. After 5 minutes, he often wanted to continue. Not because he suddenly became a different person, but because the hardest part had already happened. He had started. The task that looked enormous from a distance became much smaller once he was actually doing it. Jake also created another rule for himself. He stopped negotiating. Before, every task became a conversation in his head. Should I do it now? Maybe after dinner. I'm tired. Maybe tomorrow morning. Actually, Monday would be better. Every question created another opportunity to choose comfort. So he created a simple rule. When it was time to begin, he would start for just 5 minutes before allowing himself to make any other decision. He didn't need to feel motivated. He didn't need to feel confident. He didn't even need to believe he could finish. He only needed to begin. And every time he followed that rule, he gave his brain new evidence about himself. Instead of proving, I always postpone things, he was slowly proving, I can take action even when I don't feel like it. After a while, Jake realized something that completely changed the way he looked at his goals. He didn't need a new personality. He didn't need to become incredibly disciplined overnight. He didn't need the perfect morning routine, unlimited motivation, or a sudden burst of confidence. He needed a different pattern, because your identity is built from repeated actions. Every time you say tomorrow, you're practicing postponement. But every time you take one small action today, you're practicing follow-through. 5 minutes may look insignificant. 1 page may look insignificant. 1 push-up may look insignificant. Opening the document may look insignificant. But repeated small actions teach your brain something powerful. You are someone who starts. And maybe this is the part Jake wished he had understood 2 years earlier. Tomorrow will always sound better when today feels uncomfortable. Tomorrow feels clean. Tomorrow feels full of possibilities. Tomorrow is where the perfect version of you lives. But your actual life doesn't happen tomorrow. It happens in the small moments you're experiencing right now. Every time you postpone something important, you're not only delaying the task, you're strengthening the habit of delaying. And every time you begin, even when you don't feel ready, you're strengthening the opposite habit. You are teaching yourself that discomfort doesn't have to control your decisions. You can be tired and still begin. You can be uncertain and still begin. You can be unmotivated and still begin. You don't have to wait until you feel like the person you want to become. You become that person through the small decisions you make today. So the next time you hear yourself say, I'll start tomorrow, don't immediately promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. Instead, stop and ask one simple question. What's the smallest version of this I can start right now? Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's 1 page. Maybe it's 1 email. Maybe it's 1 push-up. Maybe it's simply opening the file you've been avoiding. You don't have to finish everything today. You don't have to transform your entire life in one afternoon. You just have to break the pattern once. Because sometimes the biggest change in your life doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with the moment you stop negotiating with yourself and take one small action. And if you've been waiting for tomorrow to become the person you want to be, maybe tomorrow doesn't need to be your starting point anymore. Start today.